Well, good evening to everyone. I hope everyone is well and coping with this pandemic that we are currently in or have been for the last 2 years or so. Um, I want to talk to you about a concept that I came up with. Let me introduce myself first of all. My name is Dr. Philip Galloway. Uh, I'm currently living in Thailand and I am teaching at a university here on the island of Phuket. I've been here just over 12 and a half years at the university and lived in Thailand for over 16 and a half years. I'm currently an English lecturer, and early last year, I completed my doctorate. You may be thinking, well, at my age? Well, yes, at my age, believe it or not, because I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she was one of the reasons why she inspired me to progress in my education. The concept I want to actually talk to you about today is a concept that I created by the name of Allidiocentrism. The actual pronunciation is easier to say. The spelling is should be down below on the heading of the name of this live video. Um, However, the concept that I came up with is Allidiocentrism actually came from two concepts. One was to be allocentric and idiocentric. Therefore, I combined the two together to form Allidiocentric, to be Allidiocentric. You probably wonder why I did that. Well, it all started off when I did my doctorate. I used variances such as high and low context culture. I used collectivism and individualism, ethnocentrism, uh, narcissism, and neutrality, and all these ideologies that came from cultural awareness, which actually does affect all of us and who we are according to what culture you come from. The high and low context culture actually came from the psychologist Edward T. Hall, who is no longer with us, unfortunately. But he used that concept to compare cultures that come from a high context culture, such as China, Japan, Thailand, quite a lot of Asian cultures there, some African cultures, Arabic cultures as well. However, the low context would cover people like UK, America, Germany, Sweden, and Holland, and very similar countries to that. So that was the concept of that idea. The collectivism and individualism is actually correlated to these other two concepts. And a gentleman who, again, is no longer with us, sadly, by the name of Gert Hofstede, a well known psychologist, who coined the phrases. Apparently, they weren't his phrases, but he used them to show the differences in culture. So you've got the collectivists cultures, the ones I've already mentioned, they're attached to the high context, and the individualists are attached to the more Western type cultures and the low context. So bearing that in mind, we can move on to the allocentric, which is all, which is again attached to collectivism and the high context, and the individual, idiocentric, would be then associated with the low context and individualistic cultures. So that's the background of my concept. The idea came from these concepts themselves. And what I mean to be allidiocentric, um, allidiocentrism, what is that? Basically, within collective societies, as a lecturer, I was teaching Thai students and other students from different other Asian backgrounds, Indonesia, naming one. Also, I had individualistic students from Germany, but more and also the Chinese students again and Japanese students. So it was really predominantly those three particular cultures Thai, Japanese, and Chinese predominantly that I was working with. And what I found was the fact is their ideology was this collectivist, high context, allocentric. Now, this is not to say that these people are always like this, or am I always an individual? We all have the mixture of two, where family is collectivist, working for a team or playing for a football team, or working with a group. That is all collectivism in itself. However, I wanted to put across to the students and work with them in groups, but I really wanted them to find their own voice within the group. So I came up with this concept of being Allidiocentric. So working with students, working the groups, they like that. They're sharing the responsibility. However, to be an individual is not within their cultures as a rule. It's challenging the teacher, losing face ideology, making mistakes can be frowned upon. Again, the educational systems in some of these countries, I didn't quite agree with. And I did challenge the teaching methodologies that were used and were being used, such as rote learning, very industrialized, antiquated style of teaching, using just one word here, one word there, instead of phrases, words in context, role play. These things weren't really happening as I saw them over the years I've worked here. So my ideology is always to get the students to work in groups, but having each student within that group to have their opinion, their say, their piece, put their input, and it works because when they work together in the group they're in, they're not looking over their shoulder, or they're not in fear of the teacher listening in. They can work together, peer learning, which is by far the best way to learn. And so therefore they felt a little bit more at ease, if you like. And so when they come to do their presentations, they put together their presentation PowerPoint slides. They put together the presentation as a whole, whatever the topic matter was, and then each one of them had their own part to play and own. It's a little bit like a theatre show, if you like. You've got characters in the play, and they all make up the play, but each of them have their own lines. Or even like a jigsaw puzzle would be a good analogy. There may be individual pieces, but they all go together to make a whole picture. You could use other analogies as well. And I tried to use another one as like, I'm the black and white dog and I'm running around after the sheep. That is a very easy way to look at collectivism as the sheep and the black and white dog as the individual. And by no means am I saying that my students are sheep. But it worked, and it's starting to make a difference because, as my daughter is half Thai, and of course I'm English with Scottish roots, which I'm very proud of. I'm also an individual, but I also like to work with people. I think brainstorming, working off others, learning off others, different skills, different cultures, understanding how they think and how they see life. It was important for me to try and get the students to understand that teachers from the West are simply like this because of where they come from. And I felt that a lot of Western teachers were coming here and seriously just expecting students to be an individual, to think for themselves, and it's not within their culture. This is generically speaking, however, and I'm not saying it's always the case. Things are changing, things are getting better with these things, mobile phones. People are finding themselves being an individual, but to me, in the wrong way. They're almost cutting themselves away and finding solace through their mobile phone, which is something I'm researching at the moment. Um, you can see my article that I've written on this either through ResearchGate, Academia is another one, LinkedIn under Dr. Philip J. Galloway. You can see some of the information that I've been talking about. It was an article that I've created, even though it was part of my doctorate, teaching methodology and cultural awareness. Um, to be honest with you, it was something I felt very passionate about, and I wanted to make a change, simply because I wasn't really that impressed with the way the society was taking the students. It's very sad when you think that the third year running, they talk about the Thai level proficiency, for instance, their English ability has dropped again for the third year running. Um, and it's very hurtful because I have a daughter that's within this system. So I felt the need to actually do something about it. And I wanted to make a change, and I intend to do that. Um, Unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic, which thankfully is sort of easing off, I believe it's becoming more endemic rather than a pandemic. I will give myself an opportunity, I hope, to explain my findings, to explain to the teachers who took part in the research itself. Um, there's a couple of other things that you could think about. The collectivism high context, allocentric. It's implicit. Everything's implied here. You hear saying, "What do you mean by that?" And what does that mean? And you find yourself being in that sort of ideology, that mindset. Whereas where the country that I come from, certainly America and parts of Europe that I previously mentioned, we're more explicit. We explain things. We're sort of like a flat pack that come with instructions. Um, but again, this is not to say that it is, I'm ethnocentric, thinking that my culture is better. This is not the case. I don't believe in that cultures are better than other cultures. I think we're just simply different, and diversity is what humanity is all about. Um, and I think that's wonderful, that the fact that we have such diversity. But I think we would have a rather a nice, a better place to live, a nicer world to live in, especially in the education world. That if the student understands where the teacher's coming from, and most certainly where the teacher understands where the students are coming from, and what's best for them, and what can the teacher do to benefit the students, because after all, it is the students' future that we are and should be thinking about. I'm not certainly not part of the future, but my daughter is, and I want to think about her future and the students I teach at university, their future and their own children and grandchildren and so on. I think education is the very crux of society, and sadly, there are many parts of the world where children do not simply get educated, and they have zero chance in life to progress and to have any future for themselves. So, as an educator myself, I'm very passionate about what I do. Um, I hope that you've liked my short video. I won't go on too much, but again, like I said, you can find me on LinkedIn and under there with Dr. Philip J. Galloway, or ResearchGate. If you put Allidiocentric, Dr. Philip J. Galloway in the Google search, you will probably find that you can find something about me and the concept that I created. I'd just like to thank you for your time, and please leave any comments that you have down below, and it will be very interesting to read what you may well think of my concept itself. So until then, please stay safe. I'm hoping to come back on a live session again and record something different. I'm doing mobile phones. I think that they're harming human relationships. That's the research I'm involved in right now. So if you're interested in that at all, taking part in that, there is a QR code and a Google form that you can participate in. But please leave a comment and any email, and I'll gladly get back to you on anything you'd like to know. Until then, thank you very much for your time, and please stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.